Hey everybody, welcome to the Train Zone. Today's featured presentation is we have this post-war Lionel O22 O-gauge switch. Lots of rust, some tarnish, corrosion. I selected this one for the video because it's such a good specimen to show you many things to repair. Got some loose rails on this one. Missing a fastener here. Usually that's pretty important for this switch to work because it needs to clamp this thing together and make the electrical contacts inside that I'll show you later. So, as the rotating lantern here, let's hook some power up to this thing and I'll show you how it's working. I tested a few of them that I have to rebuild. I believe 4 of them, and this one, which is the most corroded, actually works the best out of all of them. A couple of them didn't work. One of them worked in one direction. You can see it's only throwing halfway there. Doing pretty good that way. Put a little more voltage up on the transformer. Yeah, see, that's going to derail the train. It's stuck. Yeah, we like the illuminated lanterns with these. The controllers are illuminated. One thing I noticed on this, what I believe happened is they lost this bolt. They had it apart. They were working on this thing. And you can see what they did to the screw head. Now I think I'm going to have a hard time getting that thing out. Looks like they rounded it off pretty good. Might have to get the chisel on that thing or the punch and knock the corner of it a little bit. And this switch is nice, better than like the Lionel switches that are riveted together. It has these little screws so we can tighten up these rails. And then a couple screws here for the cover. So I'm going to go ahead and take this thing apart and I'll show you the insides. Alright, got this thing apart. This is what we're working with. Let's start with the switch motor here. You have the power port here. If you were plugging in constant power. These little contacts here are really dirty. We're going to clean those. As the switch, see, it's catching right there. As this switch switches back and forth, we got to have the contacts clean here for the lighted controllers to work. And it's getting the connections from the insulated rails for the non-derailing feature. Now, one of the biggest things on the switch, you have to oil all this stuff. It has to be really smooth, and maybe a little bit of oil in the solenoid in here, because this stuff's just so gummy. A lot of this stuff's, most of it's from the 50s. I don't know the exact production dates on these, but everything's always gummed up. It's just always sticky. I'll use WD-40. It's going to dry up later. It works for a long time. You could put some oil on it too. But the biggest thing about these switches is the center rail contact here for the power. This pin right here and then this pin right here all need to make proper connections with areas in here. The center rail connector, and then you can find the corresponding solder lugs here that have dimples in them. Let's see, let's find one right here. One of those pins touches here, and then you can see that dimple probably right there. The other one is there. And if stuff's not working correctly, you can bend these tabs up to make the proper connection. You know, this switch was working without that other screw in there clamping this stuff together, so all that seems to be working pretty well. But you can see how dirty this stuff is. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to choose this dirtiest switch that I had. Even though it worked the best, we wanted to show you that this stuff can be salvaged. It can work. So I loosened the screw and tightened it back up because there was a little bit of rust there. This is, as you can see, a center rail power connection. I scraped all of this off and soldered it. Used a big heavy-duty 100-watt soldering iron. Soldered it there, soldered it there. You have to get it really hot. Use the rosin core solder that's going to clean it. And you have to really scrape it and get it clean. I could have bent these tabs, taken the whole piece out, but I wanted to see if I could do it without doing that method. So these outer rails has a connector here. I did the same thing. I scraped it, got it soldered, and a lot of stuff was working, really well on the switch. So let's see. Here's that loose rail right there. So we just bend these tabs like that. Bend this stuff back down. A lot of playware. These things are, a lot of them over 60 years old. And the kids tugging on them, pulling on the rails, taking them apart, putting them together. They've suffered a lot of abuse. So get all those rails tight. I tightened up some of these other ones in here. Look at all this stuff. Tighten it all up. Make sure every single little tab is tight. Alright, we're looking pretty good in here. So the next thing I'm going to do, I got the electrical, I believe, looking good here. I want to go with the, I'm going to clean these contacts here. We're going to oil up the switch. I ran the toothbrush around in here, got all the dust out. You can see all the dust. It's always going to be full of stuff. This is actually fairly clean for the amount of corrosion on the outside. A little bit of rust here. This stuff can be really dirty inside, but I've restored a number of these, over a dozen, and every single one has worked. Alright, I'm going to oil this thing up. Alright, I oiled inside of this thing, and what a difference. Put a couple drops of WD-40 on the solenoid, cleaned around in there. I really like to use Q-tips lately. I'll clean motor armatures in and around the gears, on the side of a motor or something like that. The Q-tips are really underrated for Lionel train repair. This is butter smooth. Clean everything in here and under all this stuff, in and out of there, and then especially that pivot. There's a pivot right in here, and this is just so smooth the way I like it. All right, I cleaned one contact already. You can see the difference. Look how clean that is. Look how dirty that one is. So I wanted to bring you along, show you how quick and easy this is. And then keep running the switch back and forth, because it'll clean the other side of it then with that WD-40 that's on there. Look at all that. Look how easy that is. And I'll show you a little bit more on why these contacts, the way that it's wired up inside the switch, and how they do what they do. See, and it's cleaning every time I move this. It's wet. It's cleaning the other side, the top half that I'm not sliding anything in there to try to get to. It's not quite that important. We're just building trains. We're not building rockets. Yeah, this is working so smooth. This is going to throw back and forth fine without constant power at like 6 volts with the train barely even moving. This thing, look how slick that is. So I'll talk about those contacts a little bit more. We talked about the pin is going to contact here. The center rail goes here. And then another pin here. So these 2 pins go to the insulated rails for the automatic non-derailing feature. So let's follow those pins. Here they are on the outside. So if we follow it, it goes to the inner insulated rail. And then we follow the other one. Solder's under there. And you see the gap. So the insulated rail is the outer one here, which is different than the O27 switches. Like, let's say the 1122 post-war switch, the insulated pins have to be here and here. And a lot of the K-line switches, as far as I know, are the same way. Well, in these O22 ones, and probably some other O-gauge post-war that I haven't worked on, you got to have the insulating pins here and here. And then when the steel wheels hit there, makes that circuit. Alright, we got that all cleaned up. We're going to bend those tabs up a little bit more and make sure that it's making contact. And it's spring-loaded. And I think this guy's about ready to go together here. So when putting it together, the only thing you have to watch out for on this switch is this pin right here that's going to throw the piece in the switch right here. And I'll move it from under here. If I can find that. You got to get that pin lined up. So that's the straight position all the way over. We'll put this the same way. So they're both down. Push that in there. Let's look. So there's the pin. It's right there. So then try it out. Yeah, that's butter smooth. I'll probably even clean under there with the Q-tips, a little WD-40 under there, because it'll be a little sliding. It looks pretty clean though. I'd already cleaned this off. This was really dusty. I'd already cleaned it off with wet paper towels, and so now we're going to screw this thing together. Alright, we have her all reassembled. This is the same voltage that we were testing the switch out with before. I did have to clean inside of here. There was so much dirt. Put a little WD-40 in that pivot. Sprayed a little bit into here. Sparingly, not just soaking it. So now let's test the non-derailing feature here. Alright, you see the switch is thrown that way. What happens? Look at that. Alright, that's what we're looking for. Connecting those circuits that we were showing you underneath that goes to those pins. Now, we already showed you the lantern, how cool that is. Green for the straight on. Now I'll hook up the lighted controller. One more thing to note on this switch. All these switches with this external power port for the constant power, if the tab isn't touching the center pin there, let's say the kids jammed something in here, it got bent, and it's not making contact, then the track power isn't going to make it to the switch, and that could be one of the only reasons your switch isn't working. And when you slide the power port in there, you know, it opens up this circuit, and then the constant power going through the plug that you're plugging in, now that's what's plugging or powering the switch. So keep that in mind too. You could kind of wiggle this around, make sure it's really tight, spring-loaded in there. The controllers, they have this old wiring on here, insulation. It's pretty usual. You'll see this, it all breaks off and makes a mess all over the place. Just real brittle. Look at that, just coming apart. So we're gonna take these wires off. Got some new wire. Picked up a 100-foot roll of this 3-strand. Got it off one of my favorite train shops on eBay. Soldering iron that I like to use, since there's so much metal on these. I use a 100-watt soldering iron, heavy duty one. Gets real hot. You got to heat up this big lug right here. All this solder. The smaller soldering iron is just not quite as easy for me. Alright, let's get these off of here. I'll show you how to do one here. Get in there. tough to do by yourself. You got to hold this with all your fingers. All right, what a mess. This stuff will get all over your floor, shorten out. So we have our new wire ready to go. This is how I like to set it up. Get this guy wrapped in here. Move your needle nose. You got to get one of these set to help hold the wire before you can move on. The end one always goes to the end. The other side end one here, you know, on the side of the 3 goes over here. The center one to the center on these single controllers like this. Rosin core solder for electrical work. Here's how I like to clean my soldering iron. Put this flat end on it. Get the lug good and hot. Don't want a cold solder joint. Don't wiggle it around for 10 seconds. Let it cool down. Get a little solder in there to make a bigger point of contact for the heat. Get the lug nice and hot. You want it this hot so you can get solder on both sides of it. Around the back side here. That light socket's probably blocking the view on this one, isn't it? Simple as that. I'm putting some strands of 4 foot of wire on here. That'll be plenty for what I'm doing. Got your new wire. If one of your spring-loaded, these things need to spring back. If they're bending and they have some damage, this one was bent way back and it was real weak. Get it real hot with your iron. Put some solder in there to strengthen up that bottom. And it restores it. It wasn't broken. It wasn't even really cracked, but it was weak. I could tell it was getting ready to fail, worse than it already was. So I repaired that one earlier. Alright, we have the lighted controller hooked up. Let's just see how this looks. Beautiful. So this is probably 9 volts, I think. I'll bring it up a little bit more. I'm just running it off an old transformer. Here's like probably 14. Beautiful. You can do it too. Patience, some spare parts. They're all available off the internet, train houses, eBay. Thanks for tuning into the Train Zone.